back to the Nerdy Grail and welcome to a brand new Versus here on the channel. Well, I say a Versus, it's more of a movie review of a recent movie that's come out, but I'm going to make a couple of comparisons and compare it to a previous movie that came out a year ago from the same universe. Now, as we know, James Gunn has taken over DC and DC Studios has started their own new universe, which started last year with David Corenswet taking on the role of Superman, which I have done a full review on. So if you want to check out my full review on Superman, feel free to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description down below for you to check out my full thoughts on Superman 2025. I did also do an unboxing of the Blu-ray and also the 4K Steelbook of Superman 2025. I did overall enjoy Superman 2025. It was a different take. But I did feel it was a little bit cluttered at times. There was lots of different heroes coming in. It wasn't just Superman focused, even though they tried to make it Superman versus Lex Luthor, who was phenomenally played by Nicholas Hoult, who is a fantastic actor, and I love almost everything that he's in. And I think he was perfect for the role of Lex Luthor. And I look forward to seeing him a lot more in future installments into this new DC universe. But they had other heroes as well, like Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and Mr. Terrific. You know, they were trying to build up a universe straight away rather than focus and just hone in on the Superman story, which I thought was a little bit of a risk to take. But then this year, we of course, and only a couple of days ago, it came out and I saw it with my fiance, we saw Supergirl 2026. Now, we had a little tease of Supergirl at the end of Superman, where she came to collect her dog Krypto, which Krypto was another fantastic moment in the original Superman movie from last year. Love Krypto. And when I saw the trailers for Supergirl and saw a lot of Krypto, I was very, very happy until they revealed what the plot was going to be, and then that sort of ruined it kind of for me. Now, at the time of recording this video, when we want to compare how both movies are currently doing in terms of Rotten Tomatoes score, it's clear that Superman is actually doing better than Supergirl. With, at the time of recording this video, Superman sits at 83% from the critics and 90% from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Quite high, considering that the movie is about a year old now, well, nearly a year old. But then Supergirl, which has only been out a couple of days, is already dramatically a lot lower than that, sitting at 56% from the critics and 77% from the audience, which is a little bit disappointing considering it's only been out 3 days, and that means that it possibly might not go up very much higher, and if anything it could go down. So somewhere along the lines, some people are not really enjoying Supergirl for whatever reason. And the more people I actually speak to, the more they're actually coming away from Supergirl saying that was kind of mediocre, it was a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit of a letdown, you know, nowhere near as good as Superman, what are they doing? You know, should we get rid of James Gunn already? This, that, and the other. You know, a lot of negativity towards the movie. Now, I am going to, in this video, obviously compare Superman to Supergirl, but obviously this is mostly going to be just a review of Supergirl, because I've already done a full-on review of Superman, so I don't really want to touch on it too much. But what I am going to say is, on the Superman front, before jumping into Supergirl, is that David Corenswet, I know a lot of people are a bit iffy on his interpretation of Superman. Some people are still a bit salty, obviously, at the fact that obviously they got Henry Cavill back for their cameo in Black Adam ages ago, and then obviously they fired him again, and they think that he would be the best for Superman, and that David isn't really the best suit. But I actually quite like him as Superman. And I actually quite like him as Clark Kent as well. I think he does a really good job as Clark Kent. You know, it's a little bit more of a slightly different take. And I feel like the change between Superman and Clark Kent in the Superman 2025 movie obviously is not dramatic. That's kind of the fun of it, the fact that Clark barely puts on a disguise and people still can't tell it's Superman. But he does feel a little bit more different than the usual Clark Kents that we get in terms of their disguise and how they're portraying themselves. You know, he's got the glasses, he's got the new outfit, but he also changes up his hairstyle as well. He's got a little bit more of a messy persona, and I quite like that. It's a little bit more distinct from his Superman persona. Whereas other Supermen men in the past, you know, they have sort of not really changed an awful lot between Clark and Superman. But, you know, all of the rest is still really good. You know, Christopher Reeve's Superman was fantastic as well. But yeah, I quite like David Corenswet as Superman. Like I said, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor was fantastic. Great villain from start to finish. You could tell, and he was believable in his hatred of Superman. So I thought that was really, really good. I thought the problems with the Superman movie were it was a bit too chock full of characters. Like I said, trying to set up a big universe early. And also the fact that then the pacing was then off as a result of that. And I know some people didn't really like the two, almost, it's weird to say in a comic book movie, but felt too comic booky, too silly. But I think that's just people being so used to the Zack Snyder universe of, you know, Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, you know, where Superman was taking down a lot more of a darker path. I feel like this Superman movie for James Gunn was going back more to the more comedic, comic booky, silly roots of like the Christopher Reeves movies. You know, I felt like that, if I'm honest, and I feel like that's kind of what you need for Superman. I've never been a massive fan of Superman anyway. I'm more of a Batman fan if I want a DC superhero. But I must admit, I did have some enjoyment of Superman. I wouldn't say it was a terrible movie, and I would agree with what the Rotten Tomatoes score is. I would say Superman is probably about an 8 out of 10, a 7 to an 8 out of 10 movie. You know, not perfect, but definitely not bad by any shape of the imagination. But like I said, if you want to check out my full thoughts on Superman, then you can do below. So I'd say Superman is definitely a good movie. But now obviously moving on into what we're mostly here for, and that is Supergirl, which I watched a couple of days ago, starring Millie Alcock as Kara and Supergirl. You know, we got a tease of her at the end of Superman, where she came in quite drunk and wobbly and a bit all over the place, a little bit of a mess, you know, coming to collect Krypto from Superman, who was looking after Krypto for the events of the Superman movie, so helping out Superman to defeat Lex Luthor. So we sort of got an idea of what her character could be, and they set that off from the get-go. What I will say is that one big difference between Superman and Supergirl in terms of the movie, not the character, is that the tone is similar but also vastly different. Superman was pretty much all set on Earth. There was like other dimensions and things involved in Superman through like teleportation and portals that Lex Luthor had been building and using. But I'm talking more about it was predominantly Earth-based, so it felt very grounded and down to earth, so to speak. But then Supergirl, you know, took place completely off-world, on spaceships, in space, on vast different planets, you know, with different alien races and alien species. I remember saying at the time when watching it in the cinema that it felt like a combination of Star Wars meets Guardians of the Galaxy, which, you know, James Gunn being a big part of the Guardians films, felt very, you know, yeah, like copy and paste. Now, the plot of Supergirl as well also felt very copy and paste, or definitely inspired from a previous work of James Gunn. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm obviously talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume number 3, because obviously the main plot of Supergirl is Kara is traveling the universe to find Krem, this like alien warlord character who's your big antagonist for the film, who's shot Krypto with this poison that is slowly paralyzing him and will eventually stop his heart and he will die. So she is basically trying to save Krypto's life. She has only 3 days to track him down, get the antidote, and save Krypto's life, which is what I meant by I was very disappointed in when I learned what the plot was. In terms of Krypto, I was very disappointed because I love Krypto, and knowing he was going to be out of action for most of it, had that. But as a result, that does copy and paste a little bit from Guardians 3. Because if you've watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, you know that obviously their like animal-based companion in their team, Rocket Raccoon, you know, gets injured and hurt and is dying, and basically the rest of the Guardians are on a journey to save Rocket before he dies. So it does feel very copy and paste, which is a bit of a shame. But I did like it. You know, I liked getting to know Kara as a character. You really went through the emotional turmoil of her having to grow up with Krypton being destroyed, you know, and watching her family and those who around her die slowly from kryptonite poisoning, which I thought was an interesting touch, and quite emotional. The stakes there were very high. Kara does get this little companion girl called, I had to write her name down, Rufy or Rufii, whatever, I can't remember, played by Eve Ridley, who did a fantastic job, by the way. She was a really good companion for Kara to have, who we learned very early on. Her family gets killed by Krem, who kills like her father, her mother, her brothers and sisters and whatever, over these weapons that the father is able to build. And so she's out for revenge to get Krem. So teams up with Kara to, track down Krem so Kara can get the antidote and she can get her revenge. But she's really, really good. She's quite funny. She's quite headstrong. She's not annoying. Like she's like one of those teenage actors, whatever. Like, she does a really good job. And I believed her pain and her loss all the way through the film, because that is literally what this film's all about: is pain, loss, grief. It's a very different tone to Superman, which was very comedic in tone as well. So if you're looking for a more darker toned film, look no further than Supergirl compared to Superman. But there was a lot of comedy in it as well. Trust me, there was some great funny moments on here. There was a couple of chuckles, a couple of laughs. Like I said, Millie does a great job as Supergirl, going from the serious tone to the more sarcastic, goofy tone. I quite like that. I like the fact that she doesn't actually wear her Supergirl costume for most of the movie, only in the final fight. Almost like she's trying to earn the right to wear the suit because she doesn't feel like there's any point. Because she has this big speech at one point where she thinks all hope is lost, and she's talking to the girl and saying that, talking about Clark and how she's different to Clark, even though they're cousins, and it's like he sees the good in everyone, whereas I see the truth, where she knows that not everyone is good and there is darkness in people. But, she has to learn that, just to be nice, you don't always have to be good all the time. You just have to, well, you do, but it's like there's a difference there, and it was quite nice. And the way she earns her suit at the end was really, really good. They had this really weird plot line going on all through the movie, which they didn't really touch on much in Superman. But obviously the power of the suns that power the planet, which obviously we know the yellow sun powers up their powers and makes them super strong. Like Superman did have to power himself up in 2025's film, to get his powers back and back to full strength and heal himself from a battle. But they really hammered that home in Supergirl. Like she was on a red sun planet where her powers were pretty much almost null and void or extremely weakened. She'd go to a yellow sun planet where obviously her powers are at full strength. And then at the end she went to like a green and yellow sun planet. So the green sun almost gave her the like the kryptonite poisoning that her parents suffered with, which like nullified her powers and was slowly like poisoning and killing her bit by bit, which was a really weird thing. They literally specified that before going to any planet. Was this is a yellow planet, this is a green one, this is a red one, so this is what's going to happen. So I thought that was interesting as well. But it did become a bit in your face at times, I must admit. Jason Momoa is also in this movie. He cannot stay away from the DC universe. Obviously, originally he was one of the few things that remained, with Aquaman, but he's playing the character Lobo in this, who is really, really good. He is a bit more of your comic relief. He's a bit of like your wild card character. He's not really an antagonist, but he's not really a protagonist either. But he does help out the main crew to defeat Krem at the end. And he is just sarcastic and funny through the whole thing. He's just a wild character. I do like Jason Momoa. It is just interesting that he's returned to the DC universe despite the original one being disbanded, more or less. Like, keep him on, why not? But yeah, I thought that was quite nice. And Krem as the main villain was really sick and twisted. You wanted him to get his comeuppance, because there's the underlying plot here that their race that Krem is from is all male, and so they hunt for females in order to, mate, basically. And this, like, basically the equivalent of sex trafficking that goes on in this movie, capturing all these young women and girls, capturing them, taking them back to their planet or whatever, or, wherever they're located to at the time, and then repopulating that way because there's no females of their species. So it did feel quite sick and twisted and made my stomach churn at times. So when a villain can do that, that's a good villain for me. So I will say I'd enjoyed the villain there. But yeah, I know all the people saying that obviously Supergirl is a terrible movie. Obviously, we know by the end of the movie it is a predictable movie, which I suppose is another reason people don't like it, is Krypto's not going to die. And that is the case. Kara does get the antidote back, defeats Krem, and gives the antidote to Krypto, who comes back to life. I'm glad they don't do a fake-out death with Krypto either, because normally in these sort of films, they do a fake-out one where the friend you're trying to save dies, then they come back to life through like the power of love or some weird stuff like that. I'm glad they don't actually do that. So that's quite good. Crypto just comes back to life as soon as they inject the antidote into him. And then Kara goes back to Earth, learning that, you know, she should spend more time on Earth, because through the whole movie as well, Superman is constantly calling Kara, being like, come on, come back to Earth. It's your birthday. Let's celebrate together. If you spend too long off Earth, you're not going to find your home. You're not going to ever get used to Earth. And Kara doesn't want to. But by the end, she learns to love that and does go back and spend some time with Superman. And I think that's to lead into the next movie, or one of the next movies, Man of Tomorrow, I believe, where I think Supergirl and Superman are both going to be in that movie. They just love doing the Superman family at the moment, DC. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I'd say overall, both movies, you know, they've got their positives, they've got their negatives. Would I say that Supergirl is a terrible movie? No, I wouldn't say Supergirl's a terrible movie. And I think people who are slating it to high, high heavens as the worst thing we've ever seen, I think are lying, to be perfectly honest, because I've seen way worse movies in both Marvel and DC as well. So I would say no, it's not the worst thing ever. Is it a great movie though? No, I think there's a lot of problems with Supergirl. I definitely unsure if I prefer it over Superman. I would say overall I think Superman is the better movie, but I would say Supergirl I am going to give a 7 out of 10. Because I would say I still enjoyed it enough to give it a rewatch. That rating could go up, could go down even on rewatches, but for the moment I'm going to give Supergirl a 7. I quite enjoyed it. Wasn't the best movie ever, but definitely wasn't the worst. But that is going to be my review on Supergirl 2026 and a bit of a recap and comparison to the original Superman from last year. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on Supergirl 2026. But keep all comments respectful, please, and subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nitty Girl signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.